Silahkan Mbak Dwi
Yeah.
dilanjutkan.
Good
Silahkan.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Best wishes to all of us. Special thanks to Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman for his presence as the speaker in this guest lecture entitled Recent Trends in the Asia Pacific Region, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership RCEP, Indo-Pacific, Dual Circulation Strategy DCS, and Belt and Road Initiative BRI. Okay, so here the third vice dean of the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Ahmad Rizky Sridadi, Chair Head of the Department of Economics, Mr. Rosanto Dwi Handoyo, PhD, Chair the Secretary of Department of Economics, Ms. Widya Silviana, PhD, and then dear Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman from the National University of Singapore as the speaker in this guest lecture. Welcome to the Welcome to the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Airlangga, and moderator of the guest lecture this afternoon, Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi. And dear all the audience who we are proud of. Okay, the arrangement of the guest lecture this afternoon as follows. The first, speech delivered by the head of the Department of Economics. Second, speech by the Vice Dean Third of the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Airlangga, and followed by the guest lecture opening. The third, brief introduction to the profile of our guest lecture by the moderator. Fourth, presentation of guest lecture material entitled Recent Trends in the Asia Pacific Region, Regional Comprehensive Economics Partnership, RCEP, Indo-Pacific Dual Circulation Strategy, DCS, and Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. The fifth, question and answer and discussion section. And the sixth is closing. So for the first section of the guest lecture, a speech will be delivered by the head of the Department of Economics, Mr. Rosanto Dwi Handoyo, PhD. For Mr. Rosanto, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mbak Dwi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to everyone for joining this guest lecture today. Here, Vice Dean Dr. Ahmad Sridadi, dear Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi as a moderator of the guest lecture today, and everyone, ladies and gentlemen, my students that attend this guest lecture. It is such an honor for me to speak on behalf of Economic Department, Universitas Airlangga. Let me begin by giving you a warm welcome to guest lecture entitled Recent Trend in Asia Pacific Region, RCEP, Indo-Pacific Dual Circulation Strategy, and Belt and Road Initiative. I would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman from National University of Singapore and US and Institute of South Asian Studies, ISAS. It is such a privilege to have a good opportunity to learn from the experts in the field of international trade. The audiences of today's lecturings are from the students, especially from those who took international trade class and from the lecturer of the Department Economic as well. We wish that this collaboration can continue with other collaborations such as joint research, joint publications in the future. And also, I have a message from our institution, Dr. Muhammad, that we expect our institution will improve the level of world-class university in less than 500 level from US ranking. So I hope also Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman will put us in QS ranking survey next year. We will share you the link to vote the next year. I also would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Miguel Angel Esquivias Padilla for arranging this guest lecture. This event would not be done without your hard work and your network. I hope that through this event, we all can learn and have a deep understanding in international trade, especially trade and policy in Asia Pacific region. I would not like to take too much time, so I will hand it over to our moderator, Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi, to proceed the next agenda. Once again, welcome and thank you for much to attending this event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Rosanto Dwi Handoyo, for your remarks. Furthermore, a speech will be delivered by the third Vice Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Airlangga, Dr. Ahmad Rizky Sridadi, followed by the guest lecture opening. To Dr. Ahmad Rizky Sridadi, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dwi. The Honorable Visiting Research Fellow, Institute of South Asian Studies, ISIS, from National University of Singapore and US, Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman, and also Head and Secretary Department, yeah. Also Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi, Dr. Miguel Angel Pasquivilas, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Good morning. Good afternoon, yeah. Good afternoon and warm greetings from the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Airlangga. And allow me to represent, yeah, our Dean, Prof. Dian Agustia, to welcome this and open this event, yeah. I think it is a great honor and privilege to address this today's guest lecture, yeah? And I admit this is very important because the theme, yeah, the theme of recent trends in the Asia Pacific region, RCEP, Indo-Pacific Dual Circulation Strategy, and Belt and Road Initiative. And I think this is this discussion, yeah, has significant impacts to the world of economic growth, and that definitely giving, yeah, a huge effect to the economic circulation. And I hope that in this era of regional integration, yeah, and we should look more into the new chapter for globalization, especially in Indo-Pacific or Asia Pacific. And also probably we would like also, yeah, would also like to hear the discussion of new competitive dynamics between China, yeah, China and United States in the Asia Pacific free trade region, yeah, and region as well. Therefore, we would like to present, yeah, Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman as an expert to discuss more about the thumb, yeah, and why the thumb is matters, yeah, in this context. In conclusion, let me thank to again Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman for attending and providing his valuable time, yeah. And I would like to congratulate the Department of Economics team, yeah, for hosting, yeah, this guest lecture event. With these remarks, I also sincerely welcome Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman and Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi to begin this guest lecture, and hopefully, yeah, this guest lecture could eventually fruitful for all the participants and open the further or any further cooperation, yeah, collaboration between NUS and UNER. I think. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad Rizky Sridadi, for your speech. So now, entering the next event, the moderator will be read the CV of our guest lecturer, which will immediately followed by a guest lecture material presentation. For Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi, the moderator of the guest lecture, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dwi. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again, Dr. Rahman, to Universitas Airlangga, Faculty of Economics and Business. We will have a discussion today, everyone, with Dr. Rahman. So I will introduce Dr. Rahman later on. I will give some introduction about the topic. So since November 2020, we witnessed the birth of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So I think we all know that these free trade agreements become the largest trade bloc in history, right? Because the member is 16 countries, yeah, and it account for 30% of world population and 30% of the global GDP. So, and the objective of this trade bloc is to eliminate around 90%. You can imagine 90% of in the also in this agreement is about it cover also the aspect of common rules in e-commerce and trade and intellectual property, which is also a big issue in the international trade and investment. I think this initiative will have a significant impact on the Asia Pacific economy, as it is mentioned by Dr. Rizky and Dr. Rosanto before. And at the same time, also sure that there is also some challenges around the RCEP implementation, and we will learn a lot from Dr. Rahman perhaps later on about this potential benefit and also challenges ahead, specifically the post-pandemic era. Yeah. On the other development, we also witnessed the Chinese government effort to establish BRI, Global Infrastructure Development Strategy, involving more than 70 countries and international organizations. So this initiative again will, of course, will enhance the Asia Pacific market economy through trade and investment. With regard to Chinese economy, one interesting aspect of it is that about how China succeed in implementing mixed modern economy by combining the roles of market and also government in the economy. And China also applied dual circulation strategy, where the domestic economy or internal circulation relies heavily on boosting household income and consumption, while at the same time, the external circulation will allow openness policy in trade and investment. Later on, perhaps Dr. Rahman will elaborate more about this BRI and the China dual circulation strategy. And Dr. Rahman is an international economist by training, with over 17 years of work experience in New Zealand, China, Japan, Vietnam, Korea, Switzerland, and Bangladesh. Yeah. Prior to joining ISAS as visiting research fellow, Dr. Rahman worked as a consultant with the institute. Dr. Rahman has held research and faculty position at several leading institutions, including the UN University, Japan, University of Waikato, New Zealand, Zhejiang Agricultural and Forestry University in China, Microcredit and Regulatory Authority and Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh, and World Trade Organization. Dr. Rahman was a visiting fellow at Asia Growth Research Institute and Ayoma Gakuin University, Japan, and Korea Institute for International Economic Policy in Korea. He has been a consultant also for a number of projects for the International Finance Corporation, United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, Asia Development, and Korea University of Foreign Studies. And recently, Dr. Rahman has developed 2 trade portals, Vietnam Trade and Informational Portal and Bangladesh Trade Portal, with the support from the World Bank. Dr. Rahman also published extensively in several academic journals, including SER, the Singapore Economic Review, Sustainability, South Asia Economic Journal, Journal of Economic Structure, Journal of International Trade Law and Policy, and he is also one of the editorial board member of Journal of Indian and ASEAN Studies, published by the World Scientific. That would be the introduction of today our speaker, and perhaps we will have 1.5 hours, Dr. Rahman, for you to present, or 1 hour as convenient as yours. Yeah. And after that, we will have a discussion session, a question and answer session, about a half hour. So that would be my introduction into the topic and the speaker. And the Zoom is your, Dr. Rahman. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay, I'm now sharing my PPT. So am I audible? Can you see my PPT, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you very much, Miguel, and the university. I actually never been in Indonesia. I spent quite a long time in East Asia. I spent like China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, now Singapore, quite last 15, 16 years, but never visited in Indonesia. Hope I will visit sometime in Indonesia. And thank you very much for inviting me. I will actually, I love to, answer your question. So if the student, ask different question, and that will be really good. I will try to answer their question. So it's like a communication, it's a two-way communication. It's not like a lecture. But yeah, I prepare some, documents here, some contemporary issues, what's going on in international trade, international economics, regional cooperation, and that is one part. Second part, I'll talk a little bit how we actually do this kinds of impact analysis. For example, RCF or FTA analysis, what kinds of model we use. So this part maybe useful for faculty or student who want to do some kinds of modeling or some exercise and want to publish. So there's some basic background I'll talk about. But if you want to ask some more and some question how to analyze all these things, I'm happy to answer. So my background, you already is not changing the slide. Okay, the slide is changing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just, Professor Unggul already discussed about my background, but I just quickly, briefly, give my background. Yeah, I have 2 PhD actually. One is economics from Waikato University, and I work on basically international trade issue. Especially, I try to quantify the non-tariff measures, quantifying the NTM on international trade. That is my research area. And I use both gravity model, that's been partial equilibrium model. I also use computable general equilibrium model, CG modeling. A little bit very, hardcore research, but yeah, we'll talk later that area later. I also did PhD in finance quite a long time before from Xiamen University in China. So I spent quite many years in China. And then I also worked Tokyo 2 years as a postdoc, quite a long time before also. So I also taught quite some time in Waikato, in New Zealand, in US. I've been working last more than 1 year, also different Chinese university. And consultant recently, I started a new project with the UN, in headquartered. It's called UN DESA on LDC monitoring project, new project I started last month, and work different places from think tank to university, also the public institution and the government sector also. My research focus on especially non-tariff measures. That is my research area. That we'll talk about what is NTM later and how its impact on tariff, trade. That we will talk about later, and because we'll talk about RCEP and how NTM actually affecting RCEP and why some country, for example, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, India. So how they affecting, this RCEP and what are the issues for them, especially the NTM and test facilitation. So let's talk about, so the structure. What is the structure of my presentation? I'll talk about because there is a lot of students here. So some basic background of, international trade, particularly regional integration. That is the RCEP we talk about because it is very common now. Everybody knows the RCEP, they have signed. So what is this, how this, impact on trade? So that is the regional integration like PTA, FTA, how it's, affect. That is the one. Second, we talk about, of course, a little bit RCEP and what is the nitty-gritty of RCEP, how is, who is benefiting, what are the issues are, why India opted out. So that is we will talk about. Then because of, BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, that is the one of the branded, program by China. And we talk about a little bit about what's going on BRI and other, infrastructure project and how Chinese influence the international and of course, their economical and infrastructural issues. Then the Quad in the Pacific, because of course, it is a counter of BRI. We understand, everybody understand, and why these 4 countries, USA, Australia, India, and Japan, they have organized these kinds of Indo-Pacific cooperation and how they, deal with and counter with BRI. So we'll talk about these things. Also, I will talk about a little bit the impact and how we calculate the impact of this FTA, PTA or regional integration, and what types of model we use. So I'll give you some idea, and if you have a question, I will discuss more details later. So yes, normally regarding regional integration, we talk about PTA, preferential trade agreement. That is the initial step, like after Asia-Pacific trade agreement. So some country, like for example, after is a 5-6 Asia-Pacific country, Bangladesh, China, Korea, India is there. So some country they reduce some part of tariff, some other country reduce or eliminate some part of tariff. So it's not a full elimination of tariff, is of every country. Some country depend on their economic situation, depend on their willingness or infant industry issues. So there are some elimination of or reduction of tariff, and they sign FTA, that is called preferential trade agreement. Then the free trade agreement, where the AFTA, ASEAN FTA, NAFTA, and North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, and then RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So this is a tariff elimination, but of course it's not 100% tariff elimination, but it's some sort of commitment of tariff elimination. Like RCEP, normally they initially start for 90%, then 94% tariff elimination, their target. But of course, depend on the country. Of course, Singapore is tariff is 0, so they don't have any problem. New Zealand is also their applied tariff is 0%, so they don't have no problem. But some other country, of course, like Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, they have some issues. Then more integration we called customs union, like Southern African Customs Union, or European Union. Is European Union also customs union and economic union? That's mean they have within this region, the tariff elimination, there's no tariff, no import duty, but they have a common external tariff. So when they import from other country, they have this region have a common, common external tariff when they importing from other country. So this is the customs union. Then economic union, not only this custom union, but also some other issues like common currency, common central bank, and movement of natural person freely. So these kinds of integration, deep integration, economic union. So there are different impact, different benefit of this kinds of regional integration. And for example, Singapore has been enormously benefited from this tariff elimination and FTA over the years. So impact of FTA, normally we calculate when you have this kinds of FTA, PTA, there's two types of impact. One is we call trade diversion, and other is trade creation. Trade diversion means basically trade divert from efficient partner to inefficient suppliers. So I'll give you an example later. And trade creation means trade increase between like the region. So when RCEP has been signed, that means trade will increase in the region, in the RCEP region. And diversion means some trade from other part of the world who are more efficient, but not, like for example, this part is RCEP is less efficient. So some part from maybe USA to divert to this region, to maybe Australia or New Zealand or maybe Japan. So just one example, because of the understanding of FTA and how it's work, how this trade divert or trade creates. So for example, before FTA, India export to Singapore shirt is $40 cost plus $10 tariff. So total cost is $50. And Vietnam tried to export the same shirt, but cost is $45. And same tariff, for example, $10. So Singapore import from India, not from Vietnam. So simply we understand. But after FTA, like, you know, RCEP. Now, Vietnam import tariff on Vietnam, importing from Vietnam is 0. So there's no tariff is now. So the cost will be 45. So import cost in Singapore now only $45. So you see, before this FTA, India was, you know, efficient partner, and Singapore import from India because their cost is total cost is $40, but Vietnam cost was $45. Vietnam was not efficient, you know, partner, but because of this FTA, now Vietnam is Vietnam exporting to Singapore. So Vietnam was not an efficient partner. India was efficient partner, but now because of FTA, Singapore importing from Vietnam from the less efficient partner. So that is called trade divert. So trade diverting from India to Vietnam. That is the one reason when we sign FTA. Second is trade creating, you know, in the region. So sometimes the trade will increase. So you see now trade increase between Vietnam and Singapore, trade will increase. Before, trade was between India and Singapore. So that's mean trade will create when we sign our, FTA, FTA, or this kind of visual integration. So let's talk about RCEP. What is the, there is a, RCEP secretariat. You will find all this information is there. So this ASEAN countries, 10 ASEAN country plus 6 FTA partner. But of course, in the last moment, India opted out. So ASEAN plus 5 FTA partner. So ASEAN countries has, FTA with these 5 countries, basically 6 countries like China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India. So these countries, ASEAN has an individual FTA, but now they sign a FTA with 5 countries except India. So all the materials, that legal text is in this website if you want to have a look. Yeah, so it, as the chair he mentioned, this is the biggest FTA in the world. So this is a 26 trillion of GDP and 2.2 billion people in this in the region. So one interesting thing is this RCEP, because of course in ASEAN region, 3 least developed country, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. So this country is called least developed LDC country. So they have also some developing country like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, but Singapore and Brunei is apart a middle income country. But when they signed this FTA, where Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Korea, almost developed country, so except China, but China is a powerhouse, and China want to actually 2 reasons push and lead this RCEP. One is TPP or CPTPP. That is the one reason, because USA initiated the TPP, Trans-Pacific Atlantic Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So that one initiated by the USA, but of course USA opted out. And then they have a CPTPP, and China want to take this advantage and want to lead this RCEP and design the FTA. So China actually benefited a lot. Anyway, we'll talk about who is benefited and how is benefiting. Some empirical study, we'll talk about these things later. So what are the objective? What are the issues is there actually? So the main, if you go with the legal documents, you see there have a trade and investment cooperation. That is the one major issue. So yes, they want to establish a modern, comprehensive, high quality economic partnership agreement. So that is the tone of this. And Japan, in Australia, New Zealand, and China also. China is, MFN tariff is also like less than 4% now. And Korea, a little bit higher, but Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, their applied tariff is very, very low. So it's almost 0%. So they want some kinds of investment cooperation, of course, in addition to trade. Then trading, of course, trade in goods, they want to eliminate the tariff, not a big issue. And most of countries, its tariff is very low, except in least developed country like Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. And there's no issue for them because this country, they are not exporting, most of the country, they are not exporting much to this least developed country. So Laos import is very, like $2 billion. Myanmar is $5 billion. Cambodia is like $10 billion, their import. So there's not a big issues. But one thing, they want to eliminate the non-tariff measures. The non-tariff measures is a major issue now. And every country is struggling with the non-tariff measures. Maybe if you want to understand a little bit more, the UNCTAD has classified non-tariff measures, and A to P, and one A to P is basically the classification they use. So different types of SPSS measures, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, different types of standards, technical barriers, and contingency measures. Contingency measures means 3 types of measures. That's mean anti-dumping, countervailing, and safeguards measures. So this anti-dumping, safeguard, and countervailing measures, maybe if you do not understand what are these kinds of contingency measures, like anti-dumping, countervailing, and safeguards measures, we will come back later and I'll explain later, and how much are this country imposing different types of NTM, like for example India, China, USA, Australia. All these countries has a huge NTM, and even they are in the WTO to complain against each country. Like recently Australia complained against China. USA has also the same issues. So different types of anti-dumping measures they're imposing every time. So that is the one area. Especially now, you see the COVID has a huge impact, and every country they impose the different types of non-tariff measures. Banning, prohibiting, exporting, different types of medical goods, vaccination, injections, mask, PPE. So all these things now, many countries, recently India actually even banned, exporting the vaccination also. So this is the different types of non-tariff measures that are the main issues in the RCEP, and they try to reduce all these things. So that is the one issues. Trade in services is important. 2.2 billion people in this region, and natural movement person, educational service, financial service is a major issues in this region. So they try to eliminate different types of barrier in service sectors. Investment, also the major issues is there. Sorry. So we'll talk about investment later. So what are the coverage here? So tariff coverage, they have a 90% tariff elimination. How to so the elimination strategy is depend on the country, and they have a timeline for different countries, different timeline. Cambodia has different timeline, but of course Singapore, New Zealand, they're happy to eliminate, and they have actually eliminated almost all of their tariffs. So that is not the main issues. But of course, for Indonesia has Indonesian flight tariff is much lower compared to even Korea and some other country. And of course, the NTM that we talk about, the SPSS TBT measures and other remedies that they want to eliminate, and that is the main issue. Rules of origin, so simplified, this is other kinds of NTM. So because rules of origin is very complicated, and every product has a different types of rules of origin. So that is the main issue. So this RCEF has one issues of rules of origin that they can declare the self-declaration of rules of origin. So that is very important, for export. So this is the online submission of rules of origin. So using ASEAN single window and other different formats, they can submit the rules of origin certificate. Trade facilitation, you see the custom procedures, their target is to clear the customs within 6 hours. So that is their target. So trade facilitation, and I think all ASEAN country, and of course ASEAN +6, all this country, they have rectified WTO's trade facilitation agreement. Okay, one thing maybe you can go through with this. There is called UNSCAF RIVA, RIVA. That RIVA, they produce different types of trade facilitation update. So who is implementing and how many they are implementing, all information is there. So that's mean under WTO trade facilitation, there are 56 different types of trade facilitation program, and most of these countries they're implementing, except few least developed and developing country. Like Singapore is of course #1 to implementing this in trade facilitation. Coverage is almost every part of trade, the coverage under this agreement, from the government procurement to intellectual property rights, e-commerce to technical cooperation, SME, competition policy, everything they have covered. So it's a very comprehensive free trade agreement and very ambitious free trade agreement. Okay, now talk about the economic impact. So economic impact, there are different types of analysis they use to explore the economic impact. GDP, for example, normally we use to understand how much GDP will increase, how much trade will be increased, or export or import, or employment also. Employment, social welfare, investment, so unemployment rate. These kinds of macroeconomic impact we analyze using is called CGE, computable general economic modeling. So using this CGE, computable general economic modeling, Peterson Institute, and this also is my paper, Rahman and Ara, we try to understand that China, Japan, and Korea, their GDP may increase 1%. So that is huge, under this RCEF. But it's, of course, this is there is two kinds of impact. One is static impact, one is dynamic impact. So there are some limitation of analysis on this, CG modeling, but almost everybody, agree that these three countries, China, Japan, and Korea, their GDP will increase by 1%. So if this trade in this agreement fully implemented. Second is Vietnam, Malaysia, and Australia. They will also be benefited enormously. That is definitely. If India join, India did not join, just opted out in the last moment. Their benefit is very slim. It's very, in the short run, this benefit, GDP and export import, because Indian tariff, base tariff rate is very high, still very high. So that is one. Indian non-tariff measures is huge. They have a lot of, anti-dumping, measures, and also different types of, trade barrier, standard, SPSS related, TBT related, different types of non-trade measures is there. Domestic competition policy, domestic rules and regulation is also not streamlined yet. So that's why in the short run, Indian benefit is less, that is definitely. Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, this country, of course, will be benefited through technology transfer. That is the issue. Also, they will reduce, they will have some preferential treatment in the tariff reduction. So they will not eliminate tariff instantly. They will have a time to reduce the tariff. So they will benefit. And Cambodia, if you see, and they got huge investment, recently. So that is one issue. So, but of course, Myanmar is different world. So they have a political issues is there. Trade facilitation and NTM is the main issue in the RCEP, and that is the area to work, and every countries they are working basically on that two issues: how to eliminate different types of NTM related barrier and increase the trade facilitation. How to, like national single window, where you can do all your export import related activity in one single place and online. And trade in service is also will be benefited some country. Recently, you see, because of COVID, Australian university, New Zealand university, they have suffering a lot. So they want to, open campus in Vietnam, want to open campus in China, open campus in India, so that they want to boost their service sector also. And of course, the movement of national person now is easier, among this region. Impact assessment, so talk about a little bit modeling. This is, I don't know, but this is just because of some faculty, if you want, how to and what types of model we use for these kinds of FTA, PTA analysis. For example, we use gravity model, is a very popular, and particularly recently we use Anderson and Van Uyckhoff model. That is the multilateral resistance term we have used, inward multilateral resistance, out of multilateral resistance. And also we use Novice inverse gravity model to calculate the trade cost and try to explain how much the trade cost increase or decrease over the time. And to techniques we use normally Poisson-Sidhu maximum likelihood estimation. This is PPML techniques, not normally used because there are some benefit of this PPML techniques. And fixed effect estimation model for final data is also, commonly used. So this, slide, I talk about, gravity model that has been, that has been used extensively over the years for this kinds of FT analysis. And what types of model we normally use, this is the, recently, this is the standard model that we have used. Of course, you can use some basic gravity model, that's mean just use, for your dependent variable or your, trade or export or import, and use different independent variable. That mean the country's GDP and tariff, distance, and other gravity variable like, contingency, FTA, that is we use dummy variable. So using this dummy variable, we normally can calculate the impact of this FTA on trade. That is the basic gravity. And then if you use little bit advanced in a structural gravity model, that is suggested by the Anderson and Van Uyckhoff. But also there are some other model like inverse gravity approach we also use to calculate the trade cost. And PPML techniques, very commonly used now because this PPL technique has some advantage. and normally is a non-biased. So that's why it's a standard approach. And of course, fixed effect estimation technique is for panel data is also a standard approach. So that is the the gravity partial equilibrium model for FT analysis. And regarding CG modeling, computable general equilibrium modeling, that is we normally use, that I have been actually last 10-15 years have been using. For macroeconomic impact analysis, because we want to understand the overall macroeconomy. Sorry. And GTAP-based global trade analysis project, GTAP-based CG is very popular now because you don't need any programming skill. You can easily run, and you need to know a little bit about the some microeconomics and macroeconomics and how link with the micro and macro, and then some little bit your modeling skill that can, because it's easily inbuilt, many data is there, and you can run using different software. So you don't need to write the code. So even without writing the code, programming code, you can run. So that's why it's very popular. And also my GTAP is the extension of GTAP that I'm using currently, where we calculate the household level of impact. Not only the macroeconomic, but also disaggregate level, household level, rural household or urban household or poor household or rich household. Different types of different countries have, different social accounting metrics, different input-output table. So we can incorporate the input-output table, the input-output table, right? And from this input-output table, every country, they have a household income and expenditure survey. So every country do this survey, and then they calculate this input-output table. From this input-output table, we develop a social accounting matrix, and then we incorporate this social accounting matrix in this MyGTAP model, which is the extension of GTAP model, and where we calculate, the household level impact. For example, if RCEF implemented, what could be impact on Indonesian rural household or Java's household? So this part of rural household, how will benefited, or their economic impact, their income, their expenditure, their consumption, what would be impact on that? So this is the more disaggregated level of impact analysis. And Purdue University in USA, they are actually do a lot of training, and they develop this GTAP model and run GTAP on this database also. There are two kinds of impact. One we normally use is static model, one is dynamic model. So dynamic model, we want to see the long-term impact. Like this RCEP, what would be the impact on like 2030? When all country eliminate that tariff, what would be the impact after 2030 or 2040? So this kind of dynamic impact we can develop using this CG, and then we can run different kinds of simulation. So this part is a little bit different, but I'll talk about, because this is important when you try to understand the impact. And if you have any question, you can ask me, I will reply later. And just a bit why China, India opted out. Yes, because the big reason, of course, China. The trade deficit with China is $50 billion. So they don't want to import anymore from China. That is the one reason. Of course, there are other issues. Their domestic policy, their agricultural policy. Agriculture is a key in India, but they're expecting maybe if they sign this RCEP, they'll suffer a lot. Just one graph here, I put it here because this is you see the Indians, tariff rate. So Indian tariff base is very high. So still Indian tariff rate is very high. Indonesian average applied tariff rate is 6%. So still is high, 6%. But other country like Korea, Australia is much lower. So that's why Indian, the tariff still is comparatively other countries is higher. So that's why their impact will be, a negative impact will be higher. So India has some kinds of proposals that did not accepted by this country. So that's why finally they opted out. So maybe there's some information here that India wanted to in this deal. Okay, let's talk about BRI. So Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. We'll talk a little bit BRI and then a little bit talk about. I spent quite many years in China, so I understand. And actually, I first went in China, my PhD in 2002. That time, basically, we started hearing this BRI. But of course, it's, when Xi Jinping branded this initiative in like 2006-07, that time. But the why they started these things? Number one, there's few reasons. One is Chinese, export is huge. So they have a huge foreign reserve. So this foreign reserve was idle. And if you have a 1 trillion of foreign reserve and you don't have any, invest this money, so they hear huge opportunity cost. So this money they lend to the basically US Treasury, is a low interest rate. So is no benefit of this, reserve. So this has a huge cost, basically, huge opportunity cost. So they start to thinking how to invest, overseas. And 2008, when there is a financial crisis, the Chinese, trade fall drastically. So they understand, okay, they have a huge problem with the trade because of this financial crisis. They understand infrastructure is the key. So that they start to develop this initiative to invest in the infrastructure. China also, they have an infrastructure bank, like they want to, counter to ADB, this kinds of World Bank and this international bank. So they start to, funding using Asian Infrastructure Bank and start to this BELT initiative. But now this BELT initiative, is linked with 150 countries. And not only economical, political, and strategical is very important now. And you see recently, they already, develop a military base in Djibouti, in African country. So it's not only an economic issue, it's a strategically important issues now. And because I think almost all developing countries, they have a huge lack of infrastructure. And Chinese understand that they can invest there. And because they have a huge reserve, foreign reserve, so they start to investing in this country. And now initially they start for the economic issues. Now, slowly it's going to the politically and strategically. Like you see in Sri Lanka, the Hambantota, port, they took lease for 99 years. So because the $1.4 billion Sri Lankan government unable to pay. So these kinds of things started, and this become a BRI, become a global, brand now. So if you see the map, the BRI map, and their, plan, pipeline, gas line, maritime, Silk Road, all these things is all over all part of the world. It started from the Shihu, is basically Yuan, It's a one small city in Hangzhou in Zhejiang province. It's called EU. From Hangzhou, it's Jack Ma's hometown. The Alibaba's Jack Ma's hometown. So it's from EU to London. So all part of the world, and this is a huge holistic infrastructure and huge investment project. Then I talk about a little bit in the Pacific, because Australia, India, USA, and Japan, because of Chinese development, Chinese progress, and BRI, and of course Chinese issue with the South China Sea, all these issues, this country USA can't resist directly, so they try to develop a free and open Indo-Pacific. That is their motto, is a maritime cooperation with Japan, India, and Australia. But interestingly here, you see, India situation is different compared to Australia, Japan, and USA, because all these three countries developed country, but India is developing country. And also the trust among this Quad, this Indo-Pacific 4 countries, is not really, that level, because USA, have very good relation with Japan and Australia, but India, yeah, so it's difficult because they really don't trust that level of, for cooperation. So although they have a, some maritime cooperation, that's mean the naval, exercise, but as a, a regional integration or is a regional cooperation, this is not that level. And also one other reason, because of China paradox. China paradox means, you see, China and Japan, China and Australia, China, Canada, they have a huge, bilateral trade and investment. So if you see, Japan, Australia already signed RCEP. So that's mean they are very eager to do business with China, but they have some different political view. So that's why this China paradox, recently there are some issues with Canada. You see the one Chinese, what's her name? The lady, she captured by Canadian government, and Chinese, sentenced a Canadian diplomat in China. So they have a huge political problem, but in economically they want to trade, they want to do business. So that is the paradox, and that's the issues, very difficult to materialize these kinds of Indo-Pacific Quad. That's why in other country like, Canada, Germany, some others, France, there are some other country, they're reluctant to join the Quad. They don't understand what to do, or they have some dilemma with joining the Quad. That's why even South Asian country, the Quad, they're requesting the Quad by Quad that you join, but they are reluctant. They don't want to join, the Quad, because there's no economic benefit or trade. There's no structural or institutional, system of Quad. So this is very difficult to materialize, and lack of trust, lack of understanding. So yeah, it could be a security forum or maritime cooperation among these four countries, but as a counter, the BRI, they don't have that types of capacity, that types of institutional capacity or strategy to deal with the BRI. So that is the one issues. So, okay. And impact, of course, BRI, has a huge in infrastructure investment. They have been infrastructure bank, investment bank. In the Pacific, they try to develop different types of quality investment, like blue dot line, red dot line, different name. But of course, they, it's like India opted out from them. They don't have that much of funding or investment situation. But Japan has taken some strategy. Of course, COVID has impact on that resilient supply chain. So the Japan Japan has few different strategy. One is they are trying to investment using ADB. They have a Japanese bank, Asian Development Bank. It's Asian Development Bank, but mostly funded by Japan. And so that is one. Second is resilient supply chain. That means Japan has huge investment in China. So now they try to, some of the investment moved from China to other countries. So China Plus, or Vietnam or Cambodia. Of course, they have a huge investment in Vietnam. So this kinds of resilient supply chain means they try to reduce the dependency on China. So that is the program, and the Japanese government has giving huge subsidy to move their plant to other country from China. And China has also have their own strategy, because China understand because of the USA-China war, they understand, and also the COVID impact, and other country like Japanese resilient supply chain, all these things, China want to the self-resilience, self-dependent. So they want to increase the domestic investment, domestic consumption. China is 1.4 billion people. So every day morning, if people eat one egg, so they need 1.4 billion eggs every day. So that is the dual circulation studies. One step is domestic consumption increase, domestic investment increase, and in addition the overseas market. Of course, the overseas market is fine, but because of the COVID and any kinds of situation, if the overseas export fall or some things happened, so they can survive and they can sustain their growth using the domestic consumption, domestic investment. So that is the dual circulation strategy China has been also taken, and because of all these kinds of global different kinds of games now. One is in the Pacific, Quad situation, China USA war, Japanese resilient supply chain, all these things. China also trying to develop their own strategy, and dual circulation strategy is one of the recent strategies that they have taken, in addition the BRI. Okay, I'll stop here, and I will take the question, and then if anything, if you ask, I'll be happy to reply.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman, for the presentation. It's very interesting. And now is the question and answer session. For all of you who would like to ask question, you may write down your question in the chat room, and from there we can begin the question and answer session. But let's start for one who want to say question or say something. Okay, say something for the first question. Perhaps someone can raise a question by unmuting the mic, yeah, while we wait for others to write down the question in the chat room. Okay, please.
Excuse me, may I ask a question, Pak Unggul?
Yes, please, Oka.
Okay. First, thank you for Dr. Muhammad for the lecture. I'm sorry, pardon me, not turning on my video because of the signal here. It is really interesting to talk about the initiative that include in Asia Pacific about regarding to the labor mobility. The Asia Pacific region seems to have a low intra-regional mobility. From your perspective, Doctor, do you see any of the initiative being a possible trigger to increase the labor mobility in Asia Pacific? Thank you.
Should I reply
Okay, thank you, Oka.
or I should
Yeah, please,
collect
Dr.
some
Rahman.
question?
Let's start by answering this one, Dr. Rahman.
Okay. I also got some other question, on the chat box. Yeah, so one question is regarding the natural person mobility. Yeah, this is important for particular country. For example, for Indonesian perspective, it's very important. For Cambodian perspective, very important. For example, the Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. Also, some is Japan, but Japanese strategy is different. Japanese strategy, they import, some worker or labor or semi-skilled labor from Brazil. That is, they have some issues quite long time before. During Second World War, many Japanese, migrated to Brazil. And so they try to give this return to Brazilian now. So they import a lot of Brazilian from a lot of Brazilian. So, but you see, Australia, New Zealand, because I live in New Zealand and Singapore, they need a huge migrant. New Zealand every year, like the target is about 100,000 people. So the skilled migrant, semi-skilled migrant, and also different types of skilled labor. But how you actually incorporate in your agreement. For example, one example, I deal with this. I know what this recently, as China, New Zealand FTA upgraded. So they upgraded the FTA, and that agreement, they have a new clause that Chinese people can go to New Zealand. They don't need IELTS, for particular job and particular activities. So because normally they require like 6.5 IELTS when they go to China, New Zealand, but under this agreement they exempted, relax this, condition. So these kinds of things, like depend on the country situation, depend on what you need, what particular country. So Asia Pacific, ASEAN Economic Community, they started in 2015, but it still didn't actually realize ASEAN Economic Community. That's why there are not this, mobility did not work properly. You see, the ASEAN countries, I spent quite many years in this region. It's really is a heart of the global, world now. All this country, you see Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, all are close by. And you can travel, you can ship your goods within few hours, any places in this region. And this is the area are huge middle class people. So they are the real, the people who can invest, who can enjoy, who can have a huge capacity. So this region has less mobility compared to EU. You see the EU region, they have of course, Brexit has big issues, but this is not happening in this region because of maybe lack of proper coordination, as a lot of issues is there, but did not successfully actually happen. But still, this region, Singapore, you see, need a lot of labor here, a lot of skilled labor and semi-skilled labor is here. So, but did not successfully happen that we expected earlier. Hopefully, this RCEF have some, if you see the service agreement in the RCEF, they have a lot of different types of issues there, train service related issues there, including the mobility issues. So hopefully, when it's implemented fully, there are some benefit from these national services. And some other question from the chat box. One is my question: do you think the BRI initiative are in line of sustainable environment development policy? Energy, oil, gas, electricity, infrastructure project have high potential environment. Yeah, so yes, of course, environmental issues is there, but if you see the cost of the other project, for example, if you see the cost of MRT, subway, yes, subway has a huge, some environmental impact, but at the same time, if you go to the other infrastructure project, the traffic jam and oil, some others, so there are some environmental cost is there, but depend on the situation. You see, one of my professor, he was talking about, we talk about Chinese environmental issues, Chinese development issues, but if you compare how much people are enjoying and how much the poverty is there, if you compare to India has a democracy, it's very good, we appreciate democracy, but the poverty line is huge, 40 billion, I think 400 million people is under poverty in India, and China eliminate poverty 800 million people within last 20 years. So yes, the democracy sometimes very good, but if the people human life is not developed, then how you actually deal with this? So this kinds of project, I understand, you see, I just mentioned in my lecture, China occupy, it's not occupied, China take 99 years lease the Hambantota port, Sri Lankan port, deep sea port, that China invests $1.4 billion, and Sri Lanka unable to pay this money, and then they have to give this because the agreement is 99 years. Yeah, so that's the situation. It can be happen. When you have a development of different stages, there's a lot of issues is there. But if you want to, deal with this intelligently and in your countries, because if your countries and the policy is not correct, then it's hard to deal with this. So yeah, there are a lot of environmental issues is there, especially oil. You see, just one example, Afghanistan. Recently, USA left Afghanistan, and why Afghanistan? USA left. Why UK left from Afghanistan? Why Russia left from Afghanistan? Because of what? Because of this oil, gas, all these things. And now enter Taliban and China. So there are some kinds of issues there. Of course, I prefer your own people rule. That is I prefer. But of course, there are some other issues there. So African country has a huge natural resources. African country has a huge opportunity also. So China definitely will love to go to these kinds of infrastructure project. China also have huge investment in other countries also, in not only Africa, Malaysia, $20 billion in investment in Malaysia. In South Asian countries, in Pakistan, the port, the big is called the corridor. There's there's a big corridor investment is there, and of course Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all this Central Asian investment. It's not in Africa, so they have a huge foreign reserve. They have a huge capacity of investment, so they are trying to utilize their money and in their way. So we cannot expect that American way and World Bank way China will play. China will play their own way. So if you are unable to manage that, then maybe we need to think about second time. But I need, like you see the Nepal, Bangladesh. So this country is belongs to basically India last 20 years, 30 years. But now because the China came out, so they try to make a balance between India and China. So the two giants in Asia. So they have a balance, so they get a lot of investment from China, and they have some political support from India. So they are balancing their strategy, and they need a huge investment from different parts. So they're getting investment from China, Japan, Korea, and also India, and their development growth is very high. So it's how intellectually you capitalize this advantage, like Chinese growth, Chinese economic power. That is my intention. How you basically capitalize their fund, their growth, their progress. It could be partner, or it could be rivalers. So that is your choice.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rahman. Another question come from Renta. Renta asking about to what extent do the new initiative RCEP or Indo-Pacific cover the e-commerce, and he also mentioned about the impact on taxation. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, the digital e-commerce, or that is very important. And taxation, one is taxation. Regarding taxation means there are different types of issues here. One is the tariff related issue. So tariff related issue is actually will eliminate. So you mentioned 90% tariff will be eliminated. So over the time, one. Second is taxation regarding investment. So investment, because the investment chapter, some country try to attack investment, and they have a different types of support for investment, tax exemption, tax holiday, special economic zone. There are many different types of mechanism to attack investment. For example, I see, Vietnam, Korea investment to Vietnam is $40 billion. And Japan also investment in Vietnam is like $25 billion. If you compare to India, you see India is a very big country, 1.2 billion people. Compared to India, then Indian, Korean and Japanese investment in India is less than $10 billion. But in Korea, in Vietnam is $65 billion. So why? There are different types of mechanism is there. Many issues is there. This is not only some policy, many other issue played here. So that it's not easy to attack FDI. There are a lot of issues is there. Okay, regarding the digitalization and e-commerce, if you see, China introduced e-currency, eRMB. So that's a very important issues. You need to be very careful, because China started the paper currency in the world first. So China is the first country who introduced the paper currency. But now China is the first country that's in the central bank, Chinese central bank. They introduced the eRMB. So many issues is that. One is to ease the trade. So easily we can trade this country. Number one. Number two, maybe China also want to monitor the who is doing business, who is exporting, who is importing, so they can monitor the currency, the fund. That is the other one, because China's investment in all over the world. So China want to use their own money, not the dollar, because USA always play an important role because they have their own currency. So now China want to, because they're investing $1.2 trillion across the world, so they want to use their own currency. So digital RMB could be the important step. So e-commerce, and in East Asia, especially because I've been this Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and India and China and Singapore quite many years. This area is very efficient, digital and e-commerce, very efficient. If I post one things, like if I post today, tomorrow in Tokyo, I receive. So this is very efficient. I don't know, maybe Indonesia, but I think East Asia is really has a huge positive impact on e-commerce and digital current economics. That is important, and that's very important for our trade and our business. And especially now, because of this COVID, this is super important. Every country need this kind of digitalization, especially the banking system. This kinds of, without, if you can't, if you want to buy from in Bangkok, because it's very cheap if you buy from Bangkok, so how you'll pay? So this kinds of digital payment is very important, and this helps a lot to increase the business and trade. So yeah, I really appreciate this East Asian country that develop this kinds of mechanism, but it is hard to other country. If even you see the Alipay or WeChat Pay, you can pay in New Zealand. I can pay any shop in New Zealand Alipay, so you can use Alipay, and you can use in last time I pay using Alipay in Germany, Frankfurt airport. I bought something in the airport, I use my Alipay because I was in China quite many years, so I have some money in my Alipay account, and I paid there. So this really helps your business. So these kinds of system, we need all this country. That really help us to trade and business.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rahman. Shall we proceed to other question? This is from Rosie. Rosie asking about what do you think that the numerous initiatives in the region may help creating more stable macroeconomic condition and less dependence to the shock from the global market?
Which one? Sorry. Okay, I got Fatima. One question. This one?
Oh yeah, it's okay. Fatima, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, national consumption. You're right. That's why every country, you see, the spending for stimulus package and expansionary monetary policy. So all over the world, every country, China, USA, I think $1.3 trillion fiscal stimulus package. Singapore has a huge fiscal stimulus package. Japan, China, every country has fiscal stimulus package offering to increase the consumption. So that is the macroeconomic theory of that is what is his name in 1940, when the World Bank, the Bretton Woods, created. That times he offered this theory that public spending is a major issue, is important for increased consumption. So every country in the world now, they try to the government is spending money to increase the public demand and consumption, and there is no other way. But this is some country has get some sort of inflation, but so far this is the way to increase the consumption, to increase the domestic demand. We need to spend money. Public expenditure is a major issue in this COVID. So we can, if you spend more money and increase the consumption, then increase the demand, and it will increase investment and employment. So that is the major issues at this moment, at this COVID time. And every country is trying to doing these things, but of course, developing country, they don't have enough money, and they're printing this money, and that's sometimes creating inflation. Some country India has this problem recently, so inflation could be an issue. But of course, we need to spend money. Public expenditure is a main issue at this moment. I have one question: increasing cyber threats and security concern with the rapid growth of digital finance. Yeah, you're right. You see, few things. One is, maybe if you follow the news, in few years back, some hackers, hack around $100 million from Bangladesh Central Bank, and the hacker are from East Asia, or from Philippines, from Korea, from Taiwan, or something like this, in Hong Kong. So this is a very organized hacking, and now this Bitcoin and all these things. So it's a challenging time. Recently, there's some hacking, some group hacks some other place, in New Zealand, and they're asking for money. So we need to spend more robust policy to secure our banking system. So every day I got phone call from many people here in Singapore that this hacking, all these issues. So it's time to actually think about again how to protect our banking system, digital currency, or digital business, because this will be another important issue. Yeah, so I think opening market and digital security is different things. Okay, one is opening market regarding your product and your service, but the payment is a different way normally we do, but it's not a opening market and cybersecurity threat. There's no such kinds of direct correlation. So opening market is in general, of course, there are some kinds of thought school is there, but in general, for particular countries, it's beneficial. In general, it's beneficial, but depend on the sector. Some sector will be negatively affected, some sector will be benefited, but in general, opening a market is basically overall positive impact in economy. But of course, there are a lot of other issues, infant industry issues, revenue issue, government, because many government or poor government, they have some issue of revenue, like for example, Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia. So they depend on their revenue depend on the import duty. So maybe they have some problem, but Singapore, they don't depend on the input duty. Important things is domestic revenue collection, domestic resource mobilization, domestic tax collection properly. That is the main issue. And most of developing country, their tax collection, internal resource mobilization is very poor and not very systematic. A lot of leakage is there. The system is poorly to avoid tax, or so these kinds of things. So that's why if domestic resource mobilization fully implemented, then market openings is better, and that is empirically and theoretically as economists we have seen, and most of country benefited from that.
Okay, I think that would be the last question from Cikara. And personally, I think perhaps in another occasion, I would like to know further how Dr. Rahman tried to develop the M.AppEc about the impact of this trade liberalization to the household in certain countries. Quite interesting how you do it, and I think it's a huge work there. And we would like to know whether there is any study have been done in the based on this, that's your GTAP model, and we would like to hear that some other time if you willing to share with us, Dr. Rahman. But perhaps is there anything that you can share about the M.AppEc model, Dr. Rahman?
Yeah, so I use M.AppEc and also GTAP static version and dynamic also. So I've been using, I think, last 20 years, yeah, many years actually. M.AppEc is the extension of standard GTAP, and in this M.AppEc is developed by Terry, the one of the fellow of GTAP, so Terry Holmesley. She developed this M.AppEc, and in this M.AppEc we can incorporate the social accounting metrics, country-specific social accounting metrics, country-specific SAM. For example, if I want to, because I understand every country has a SAM in WTO, also in GTAP. So they have most of the country. Now 121 country is, SAM is there in GTAP. So 120 country plus 21 region is a composite region. So 141 country and regions, SAM and data in the GTAP in version 10.A. So the latest version, 11 is coming next year, version 11. So in this GTAP, we can incorporate the country-specific SAM. And because when I want to incorporate some social accounting metrics for country-specific, especially the household level of income, household level of consumption, household level of even remittance. So that is the one important for many countries. And so we need to develop or find the population, the regional population, if we have. So all this income, consumption, population, we can incorporate. We separate the model. We separate model from the GTAP, and we can incorporate this. And then we can run the simulation. That is the normal way we can run different types of simulation. So that's very important for very country-specific analysis, household level of analysis. I have two papers on that. One paper is I submitted to one journal of economic system research, that is the USA, one journal from USA. So I submitted the revised version, so it's still in the pipeline. Another I have just presented to GTAP, conference last in June, the second paper. So I have 2 papers on that on my GitHub. Recently, I have prepared. So yeah, that one. And second paper I submitted, I presented also GitHub. They're asking me to do some dynamic analysis because they're asking to projection of, like for example, RCEF. We want to see when it's fully implemented by 2030. So what happened after that by 2030? So then dynamic impact. So I'm trying to actually run different types of dynamic scenario, because for dynamic simulation, I need to develop a baseline scenario. For baseline scenario, is also a complex process to develop. So that one I'm doing. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I also conduct training, on GTF a few months before in a project by a Deviation Development Bank and in Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan, because Uzbekistan try to join WTO, they are not member of WTO, so they are, planning to process to, join WTO, and they are really eager to understand what is the impact of if joining the WTO. So I got a small project and I conducted training, in Uzbekistan, and their government officer, and also think tank. And use GTF, not the my GTF, just a standard GTF and static GTF.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting, Dr. Rahman. I think that there is also one question from Yuriko just arrived. She asked about how effective are SAFE, FTA, and TPP economically for developing countries that do not have comparative advantage in trade compared to bilateral agreements.
Yeah, so that is, I mentioned, when we have kinds of FTA, like RCEP, or TPP, these kinds of FTA, there are 2 issues. One is trade could be divert or trade could be create. So trade could be divert, that is the one reason. So some sector, that is also sectoral trade could be divert. Some sector, for example, some developing country, they don't have competitive advantage in producing car. So Japan has a huge advantage of exporting car, and Japan has doing a lot of things for their supply chain, because all their the intermediate goods come from different part of the world, from Thailand, from Macau, from Korea, from Vietnam. So they have a lot of supply chain is there, and they have a comparative advantage. So some countries will be benefited here, and some country maybe will be get some negative impact, and some sector, of course, will be maybe needs benefited, or some sector. For example, if you see maybe compared to Vietnam, or compared to, like, for example, the Indian agriculture sector, because India, they believe their agriculture will be negatively impacted compared to with ASEAN country, because ASEAN agriculture sector much developed compared to India. India also, in their RCEP agreement, they raised this issue that Indian milk industry, because India has a huge milk production country, is one of the important. So they will have a huge competition with New Zealand and Australia. So that's why they said that their domestic market will be a big problem. So definitely there's some sector might be impacted, some sector will be benefited, but depend on how much and how long. If you are not in capacity or in a competitiveness, you don't have that kinds of competitiveness, then ultimately you can survive. It's very, very hard to survive. So need to develop the real competitiveness, in your where you have a competitive advantage. So that is the main issue. So competitive advantage maybe it's not really that level, but if you have a good develop your competitiveness, maybe you can overcome your competitive advantage. Maybe you have a less competitive advantage in milk production, but due to develop your competitiveness in other area, maybe you can survive and you can get benefited from this FTA.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rahman. I think it resumed the discussion. So I think the pandemic condition and also the recession experienced by many countries in the world is, I think, it would be a good moment for the country to, let's say, make the most of this kind of cooperation like RCEP, try to develop again the connection and trade each other to take into the advantage of comparative advantage that, just said by Dr. Rahman. And I think Indonesia also gladly we saw that the export and import activity getting better from quarter to quarter, and the second quarter of 2021 we already bounced back, right, from the situation of the pandemic situation, and now we are facing a quite confident, and although the uncertainty is still there, but the economic growth is quite good at 7%. And I think what I would like to say this moment is to take the opportunity to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to Dr. Rahman. Thank you very much for being with us and share your experience, your knowledge, and also your expertise in this area. Hopefully, I think we will have you back in some other occasion in the futures, in different occasion and collaboration. And perhaps that would be all from me, Mbak Dwi. Is there any closing remark from Pak Rosanto as the head of department, or should I close it the session right away?
Pak Erick can close the session directly, Pak Erick.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Pak Rosanto. On behalf of Department of Economic, Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Airlangga, first of all, we would like to again thank you, Dr. Rahman, for being here with us. It is a privilege having your lecture and discussion like this. And again, for the audience, the student of the undergraduate, postgraduate, master, and PhD or doctoral program, thank you for participating in this occasion. Hopefully, we get a lot from this forum, yeah, and take some the takeaway, perhaps the idea of how we can approach the issue of trade liberalization policy and the impact into the economy, just what Dr. Rahman mentioned a few there in the lectures. Yeah. Thank you again all, and I would like to close the session and say Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah, thank you very much to Dr. Muhammad Masudur Rahman for material to this guest lecture today. And hopefully the materials that it's covered by Dr. Masudur Rahman is useful for all of us. Thank you once again for Dr. Unggul Heriqbaldi as moderator. And akhirul kalam, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman.
Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam
Thank you.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah,
Rahman.
take care. Take
Thank
care.
you, Dr. Rahman.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, nice meeting you all.
Yeah. Nice meeting
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. Yeah,
Thank you, Masudur, for the time. I will get in touch with you soon
yeah, no
to
problem.
discuss further things.
No, thank you very much.
Appreciate very much the time. And if
Yeah.
you ever need some students from Airlangga to help you out to run some models, I think there will be some of them maybe very
Sure.
interested to join.
No problem. Yeah, I love to
Okay.
do this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miguel.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Miguel, for it. Ini put the effort for this
Yeah.
forum.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, bye.
Bye. Baik, saya tutup sesi Zoom pada sore hari ini. Terima kasih atas partisipasi Anda. Bagi yang belum mengisi link presensi yang sudah di-share di room chat, presensi akan ditutup pada pukul 15.30. Ya, jadi 30 menit lagi link presensi akan kami tutup. Bagi yang tadi belum mengisi link presensi, silakan untuk mengisi link presensi tersebut. Terima kasih. Selamat sore. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.